Hi, welcome to the Silent Avenger channel. If you're enjoying the content, please consider giving it a like and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Let's dive into today's story. My name's Ethan. I'm 41, a project manager at a construction firm, and up until a few months ago, I thought I had it all figured out: a solid career, a home I'd worked hard to build, and most importantly, a family I cherished. I was married to my wife, May, for 16 years. We have 3 daughters, Lily 15, Emma 11, and Sophie 7. My girls are my world. At least, they always have been. I just didn't realize how much I had failed them. This story isn't just about betrayal, though there's plenty of that to go around. It's about waking up to a nightmare I didn't know I was living in. And it starts with a single moment. You know the one. That gut punch realization that something isn't right. For me, it came on a random Tuesday. May and I had been distant for a while. Nothing dramatic, just the usual wear and tear of life. She'd seemed preoccupied lately, her phone glued to her hand more often than not. I told myself it was nothing, just work emails or social media. I'd been busy too, working late nights to get us ahead. I thought I was doing the right thing, putting in the hours to give my family everything they needed. But that Tuesday, I came home earlier than usual. I wanted to surprise May. I figured we could have dinner together, just the 2 of us, before picking the girls up from their after-school activities. When I walked in, she was in the living room, but the look on her face wasn't one of happiness or surprise. It was panic. Her phone was on the coffee table, buzzing like crazy. I saw the name on the screen, Ryan. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe it was a coworker. But then she grabbed the phone like it was a live grenade, holding it to her chest as if shielding it from me. That was my first red flag. Something about the way she clutched it, the way her hands trembled slightly, set my nerves on edge. I asked her casually who Ryan was. She gave me this laugh, one of those fake, dismissive ones, and said he was someone from work. Nothing important, she added, brushing it off like I was crazy for even asking. But the way she avoided eye contact stuck with me. I couldn't let it go. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat in the dark, trying to shake the uneasy feeling. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But something didn't sit right with me. So I did something I'm not proud of. I checked her phone while she was asleep. And that's when my entire world came crashing down. The messages were right there, bold as day. May and Ryan weren't just co-workers. They were lovers. The texts weren't even subtle, flirty, explicit, full of promises to meet up. She'd told him she loved him. My chest tightened, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. I just stared at the screen, my heart pounding louder with every word I read. I don't even know how long I sat there. Maybe an hour, maybe more. The messages weren't just recent. They went back months, long enough for me to realize this wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a full-blown affair. And while that realization gutted me, what hurt even more was seeing a message she'd sent about Lily. "She's too serious. She needs to loosen up," she'd written. "I can't deal with her attitude anymore." Ryan had replied, "You need to stop letting her control you. She's just a kid." That's when I realized I'd missed something far bigger than my wife's affair. My daughter, my sweet, responsible Lily, was carrying burdens no child should. And somehow, I'd been blind to all of it. I wish I could tell you I confronted May right then and there, that I threw the phone down and demanded answers. But I didn't. I sat there in silence, frozen by the weight of what I'd uncovered. Because it wasn't just my marriage that was falling apart, it was my entire family. I had no idea how deep this rabbit hole went. But I was about to find out. The day after I discovered May's affair, I walked around in a haze. It felt like my life had split into 2 timelines, before I knew, and after. And now in this after, everything seemed fake. The way May smiled as she handed Emma her lunchbox. The way she kissed me on the cheek before heading out the door. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind for so long. I didn't confront her right away. I needed to think, to figure out my next move. My first instinct was to keep my head down, act normal, and gather more information. I couldn't go off half-cocked, not with 3 kids caught in the middle of this. That night, I tucked Sophie into bed. She asked me to read her favorite story, the one about the dragon who learns to be kind. As I read, I glanced at Lily, sitting cross-legged on the floor by Sophie's bed, braiding Emma's hair. She looked so tired, like the weight of the world was on her shoulders. When Sophie drifted off, I followed Lily into the hallway. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. "You've been doing a lot around here lately. Are you okay?" She froze for a moment, her back to me. Then she turned, her face carefully neutral. "Yeah. Why wouldn't I be?" Something about the way she said it felt rehearsed, like she'd been answering that question the same way for years. I wanted to push, but I didn't know how. The next day, I decided to call in sick to work. May didn't even ask why. She just said, "Okay, feel better," and left for her job like nothing was wrong. Once the house was empty, I went through her things, her emails, her texts, even her drawers. I felt like a creep, but I had to know the full truth. It was worse than I imagined. There were receipts for dinners I hadn't been invited to, hotel bookings in her name, and long text threads with Ryan that made my stomach turn. But what really broke me was finding messages between May and her sister, Carla. Carla knew. She'd been covering for May, helping her lie about business trips and late meetings. One text read, "The girls are fine. Lily's got it under control, as usual. You just focus on yourself for once. Lily's got it under control." I sat down, the words ringing in my head. Lily wasn't just the big sister. She was the stand-in parent. While I was working late to provide for them and May was off with Ryan, my 15-year-old daughter had been raising her sisters. I thought back to all the times Lily had stepped up, helping Emma with her homework, making dinner when May wasn't feeling well, running Sophie's baths. I'd always chalked it up to her being mature for her age. But now I saw it for what it was, survival. I felt like I'd failed her. That evening, I tried to talk to Lily again. She was in the kitchen, washing dishes. I leaned against the counter, unsure how to start. "Lily, can we talk for a second?" She glanced at me, wary. "Sure." I hesitated, then said, "You've been taking on a lot around here. I want you to know it's okay to ask for help. You don't have to do everything on your own." Her hands stilled in the soapy water. She looked down, her jaw tightening. For a moment, I thought she might open up. But then she shrugged and said, "I'm fine, Dad." Really? But she wasn't fine. And deep down I knew it. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat at the dining table and stared at the pile of evidence I'd gathered. May's texts, the receipts, everything. I knew I couldn't keep this to myself any longer. But before I could confront May, I needed to do one more thing. I needed to talk to Lily. The next morning, I decided to take the day off again. I told May I wasn't feeling well, which earned me a half-hearted "feel better" before she rushed out the door. It stung, but I was done expecting compassion from her. Today wasn't about her, it was about Lily. When the girls got home from school, I pulled Lily aside. Emma and Sophie were already upstairs, and we had the living room to ourselves. She sat on the couch, her arms crossed, clearly uncomfortable. "Lily, I need to talk to you," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "And I need you to be honest with me." "Okay." She narrowed her eyes, suspicious. "What's this about?" I sat down across from her, leaning forward. "It's about everything you've been doing for your sisters, for this family. I see how much you've taken on, and I need to know, are you okay? Really okay?" Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she looked away. "I'm fine, Dad. I don't know why you keep asking me that." "Because I don't believe you," I said gently. "Lily, I found some things out recently, and I think you've been carrying more than you should. If something's wrong, you can tell me. I'm here for you." Her eyes snapped back to mine, sharp and guarded. "What did you find out?" I hesitated. I hadn't planned to bring up May's affair, not yet, but Lily's reaction told me she already knew something was wrong. "I found out that your mom, she hasn't been honest with me. Or with us. And I think that's put a lot of pressure on you." Lily let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. "You think," she muttered under her breath. Her tone hit me like a slap. This wasn't my sweet, quiet Lily. This was a girl who was hurt, angry, and exhausted. "Lily, please," I said softly. "Talk to me." For a moment, she looked like she might. Her shoulders sagged, and she rubbed her hands together, avoiding my gaze. But then she straightened up, her walls snapping back into place. "It doesn't matter," she said. "It's not like you can change anything." Her words cut deeper than she probably meant them to. "Lily, I'm your dad. It's my job to protect you. If something's wrong, I can help." She stood up abruptly, cutting me off. You can't help, Dad. You're not here half the time, and when you are, you don't see anything. I froze, her words hitting me like a freight train. What do you mean? She hesitated, her hands clenching into fists. For a second, I thought she might unload everything. But then she shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. Forget it. Just forget it. She turned and walked away, leaving me sitting there, stunned and heartbroken. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying her words in my head. You're not here half the time. You don't see anything. She was right. I'd buried myself in work, thinking I was doing the best thing for my family, but in reality, I'd missed everything that mattered. Around midnight, I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I needed to confront May. When she came home the next evening, I was ready. I'd laid out the receipts and screenshots on the kitchen table, and I was sitting there when she walked in. She froze when she saw the evidence, her face paling. "What's this?" she asked, her voice shaky. "You tell me," I said, my voice cold. For a moment, she just stood there, her eyes darting between me and the papers. Then she sighed, her shoulders slumping. "Ethan, I can explain." "Don't," I cut her off. "Don't lie to me anymore, May. I know about Ryan. I know about everything." She opened her mouth, then closed it again, like a fish gasping for air. Finally, she said, "I didn't mean for you to find out like this." I laughed bitterly. "So you did mean for me to find out eventually?" She flinched. "It's not what you think, Ethan. Ryan and I, it's complicated." "No," I snapped, slamming my hand on the table. "It's not complicated. You cheated on me. You lied to me. And you left Lily to pick up the pieces while you played house with him." Her face twisted in anger. "Don't you dare blame me for Lily's issues. She's been moody and difficult for years, and that has nothing to do with me." I stared at her, disgusted. "She's a child, May. She's our child. And she's been suffering under your nose while you've been too busy texting your boyfriend to notice." She opened her mouth to argue, but I held up a hand. "No. I'm done listening to excuses. You've already done enough damage. Now it's time to fix this, for the girls." May's face crumpled, and for the first time, she looked genuinely afraid. "Ethan, please. Don't do anything rash. We can figure this out." But I was done. This wasn't something we could fix. The confrontation with May ended with her storming out of the house. She didn't even try to deny the affair after that. She just grabbed her keys, muttered something about needing space, and left me sitting in the kitchen with a pile of evidence and a heart full of anger. I stayed up late that night, staring at the family photos on the wall. There was one of all 5 of us at the beach, taken 2 summers ago. I remembered how happy we all looked, how real it felt at the time. Now it just seemed like a lie. The next morning, May still wasn't home. I called her phone, but it went straight to voicemail. For a split second, I thought about tracking her down, but what was the point? She had made her choices. Now I had to make mine. I focused on the girls. I made them breakfast, packed their lunches, and drove them to school. It felt strange. Usually, I'd already be at work by then, and May would handle the morning routine. But as I watched them pile out of the car, laughing and chatting like everything was normal, I realized I hadn't been part of this ritual in years. That afternoon, I decided to check in with Lily again. I picked her up from school early, telling the office it was a family emergency. She seemed surprised to see me waiting in the car, but she didn't say anything. We drove in silence for a while before I pulled into a park we used to visit when she was little. She gave me a confused look as I parked. "What are we doing here?" "I thought we could talk," I said. Her guard went up immediately. "About what?" "About you," I said. "About everything." She crossed her arms, leaning back in the seat. "I told you, Dad. I'm fine." "Lily," I said, my voice soft but firm. "You're not fine. I know you're not. And I think you've been holding it all in because you feel like you have to. But you don't. Not anymore." Her lips tightened, and she looked away, out the window. For a long time, she didn't say anything. I thought she was going to shut me out again. But then, in a voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it, she said, "I don't know how to do this anymore." My heart broke. I reached over and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Do what, sweetheart?" "Everything," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Taking care of Emma and Sophie. Pretending I'm okay. pretending I don't notice how messed up everything is. Her shoulders started to shake, and I realized she was crying. I'm so tired, Dad. I don't know how to keep going. I felt like the worst father in the world. Lily, I said, my throat tight, I'm so sorry. I should have seen what was happening. I should have been there for you. She wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her hoodie. It's not your fault, she said, though I didn't believe her. I didn't know who else to turn to. Mom was never around, and when she was, she didn't care. And you were always at work. So I just figured it out. I leaned back, struggling to process everything. Why didn't you tell me? She shrugged, her expression bitter. Because you wouldn't have been there. You'd have been at the office or in some meeting, like always. I opened my mouth to argue, but I couldn't. She was right. I'd buried myself in work, thinking I was doing the right thing for them, but in reality, I'd left them to fend for themselves. I'm here now, I said, my voice breaking. I promise, Lily. I'm here now. She didn't say anything, but she leaned her head against the window, her eyes red and tired. I knew that this conversation was just the beginning. There was so much damage to undo, so much trust to rebuild. But for the first time, I felt like we were moving in the right direction. That night, I tucked all 3 girls into bed, something I hadn't done in years. As I kissed Lily's forehead, she whispered, "Thanks, Dad," before rolling over and pulling the blankets up to her chin. I didn't sleep much that night, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a purpose. My marriage might be over, but my job as a father was far from done. The next day, I decided I couldn't keep the truth from the girls much longer. May still hadn't come home, and I wasn't about to cover for her. They deserved to know what was going on, or at least as much as they could handle. After school, I gathered them in the living room. Lily sat on the couch with her arms crossed, already looking like she knew something was coming. Emma and Sophie sat beside her, confused but curious. "I need to talk to you all about something," I began, my voice heavy. "It's about your mom." Lily stiffened immediately, her expression darkening. Emma glanced between us, her brow furrowed. "What about Mom?" she asked. I hesitated, unsure how to put it into words. "She hasn't been honest with us. And I just found out some things that are going to change our family." Sophie, bless her little heart, piped up, "Is Mommy okay?" "She's fine," I said quickly, though the words felt hollow. "But she's been making some choices that aren't fair to the rest of us. And because of that, things are going to be different." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Are you getting a divorce?" I hadn't planned on saying it outright, but there it was, hanging in the air. Lily's face gave nothing away, but Emma's lip trembled, and Sophie looked at me with wide, scared eyes. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But right now, I need you all to know that I'm here for you. No matter what happens with me and your mom, nothing will change how much I love you." Emma burst into tears, burying her face in Lily's shoulder. Sophie started crying too, though I wasn't sure she fully understood what was going on. Lily just sat there, stone-faced, like she'd expected this all along. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice breaking. "I'm so sorry for everything you've been through. And I promise, I'm going to make it better. I'll do whatever it takes to protect you." After a while, Emma and Sophie went upstairs to calm down. That left me alone with Lily, who still hadn't said a word. "Are you okay?" I asked softly. She gave me a cold, hard look. "Did you really not know?" I blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" "About Mom," she said, her voice dripping with bitterness. "Did you seriously not know what she's been doing?" I shook my head, guilt twisting in my chest. "I didn't. I should have, but I didn't." She let out a hollow laugh. "Figures. You're so busy working all the time, you didn't even notice she was never around. Or that she didn't care about any of us." Her words felt like knives, but I couldn't argue with her. She was right. I'd been blind to everything happening under my own roof. "I'm sorry, Lily," I said. "For everything. I can't change the past, but I'm going to do better. I promise." She didn't respond. Instead, she got up and left the room, leaving me sitting there with the weight of my failures pressing down on me. Later that night, May finally came home. She walked in like nothing had happened, dropping her purse on the table and kicking off her shoes. I was waiting for her in the kitchen, arms crossed. "We need to talk," I said. She sighed, already defensive. "Ethan, I've had a long day. Can this wait?" No, I said firmly. It can't. She rolled her eyes but sat down across from me. Fine. What is it now? I took a deep breath, my anger barely contained. I told the girls about us. They know something's going on. Her eyes widened. You told them? Without talking to me first. What was I supposed to do, May? You've been gone for 2 days. I can't keep lying to them. She groaned, rubbing her temples. You're blowing this way out of proportion, Ethan. Blowing it out of proportion? I snapped. You've been having an affair, May. You've been lying to me, to the girls. I wasn't lying, she interrupted. I was just trying to find some happiness for myself. Is that such a crime? I stared at her, stunned. You're unbelievable. Do you even care about what this is doing to our family? To Lily. She flinched at Lily's name but recovered quickly. Don't drag Lily into this. She's fine. She's not fine. I shouted. She's been holding this family together while you were off with Ryan. She's depressed, May. She's struggling, and you didn't even notice. For a moment, she looked genuinely surprised. But then her face hardened. That's not my fault. If she's struggling, maybe that's on you, Ethan. You're the one who's never here. Her words hit me like a slap, but I refused to let her deflect. I'm not the one who abandoned them, May. You are. And now, you're going to have to live with the consequences. She opened her mouth to argue, but I stood up and walked away, leaving her sitting there alone. After my confrontation with May, the house felt heavier than ever. She was still living here, for now, but we were barely speaking. The girls avoided her as much as they could, especially Lily. When May tried to talk to her, Lily would mutter a quick, "I'm busy," and disappear upstairs. I knew I had to step up, not just for Lily but for all of them. But I wasn't sure how to fix years of neglect. The first step, I figured, was giving Lily a space to finally let it all out. One evening, I asked Lily if she'd go for a drive with me. She looked hesitant, but agreed. We didn't say much as we pulled out of the driveway. I let her pick the music, and she chose something soft and instrumental, not her usual upbeat playlists. Where are we going? She asked after a while. Just driving, I said. Thought we could talk. She sighed, sinking back into her seat. What is there to talk about? Everything, I said. Lily, I know I've been asking you how you're doing, but I don't think I've been listening. Not really. I want to listen now. Whatever you need to say, I'm here. She didn't respond right away, staring out the window as the streetlights blurred past. Finally, she said, "It's not like it matters. Talking doesn't change anything." "It matters to me," I said. "You matter to me." Her lip quivered, but she kept her gaze fixed outside. "Do I?" Her words hit me like a truck. "Of course you do. Why would you even ask that?" She hesitated, then said, "Because you weren't there, Dad. When Mom stopped caring, when Emma and Sophie needed someone, when I needed someone, you weren't there." I felt like I couldn't breathe. She was right, and hearing her say it out loud crushed me. "You're right," I admitted, my voice thick. "I wasn't there. I thought I was doing the right thing, working hard to give you all a good life. But I see now that I missed the most important parts. And I'll regret that for the rest of my life." She finally looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. "Do you know how hard it's been?" she whispered. "Trying to keep everything together while pretending everything's okay? I've been so scared, Dad. Scared that Mom was going to leave. Scared that you wouldn't notice. Scared that I was going to mess everything up for Emma and Sophie." I pulled the car over to the side of the road and turned to her. "Lily, you've been so strong. Too strong. And I'm so sorry you had to be. But you're not alone anymore. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." She broke then, the tears spilling over as she covered her face with her hands. "I don't know how to stop," she sobbed. "I don't know how to stop worrying and fixing everything, and being the grown-up all the time." I reached over and pulled her into a hug, holding her as tightly as I could. "You don't have to do it anymore," I said. "You don't have to carry this by yourself. I'll take care of it. I promise." She cried into my shoulder for what felt like forever, and I let her. When she finally pulled back, her face was red and blotchy, but she looked lighter, like a small part of the weight had been lifted. "Thanks, Dad," she said quietly. "Any time," I said. "We're going to get through this, Lily. All of us." That night, after I tucked her in, I sat alone in the living room, staring at the divorce papers I'd picked up earlier that week. I hadn't signed them yet, but I knew it was only a matter of time. May came downstairs, her face tight with frustration. "You've been spending a lot of time with Lily lately," she said. "She needs me," I said simply. "She's fine," May argued. "She's being dramatic. Teenagers always think the world is ending." I stood up, anger boiling in my chest. "She's not fine, May. She's been holding this family together while you were off chasing your happiness. And now she's falling apart because of it." Her eyes narrowed. "Oh, so now I'm the villain?" "If the shoe fits," I shot back. She opened her mouth to argue but seemed to think better of it. Instead, she turned and walked away, leaving me standing there alone. I knew then that there was no fixing this. May wasn't going to change, and I couldn't keep pretending we could make this work. It was time to move forward, for the girls, and for me. The day I finally sat down with the divorce papers, it felt like I was closing a door on a life I'd been fighting to hold together. But as I signed my name on the dotted line, I didn't feel defeated. I felt something closer to relief. It was the first real step toward rebuilding my family's future, even if it meant leaving May behind. When I told her, she didn't fight me. She didn't cry or beg or even try to argue. She just nodded, her face carefully blank, and said, "If that's what you want." "It's not what I want," I replied. "It's what's best for the girls." She didn't respond, just walked upstairs without another word. I sat in the kitchen, staring at the papers, wondering how we'd gone so wrong. But I didn't dwell on it for long. There was too much to do. The first thing I did was sit down with the girls again. I explained, as gently as I could, that their mom and I were separating. I reassured them that it wasn't their fault, that we both loved them, and that we were going to figure out how to move forward together. Sophie burst into tears, clinging to me like her life depended on it. Emma looked angry, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. And Lily? Lily just looked tired. "When is she leaving?" Emma asked sharply, glaring at the stairs as if May might come down any second. I hesitated. "She'll still be around. We'll work out a schedule so you can see her." Emma scoffed. "Great. A schedule. Like she cares." "Emma," I said gently, "I know you're upset. But your mom. She doesn't care, Dad." Emma snapped, tears spilling over her cheeks. "She's never cared. She just pretends to when it's convenient for her." "Emma," Lily said softly, placing a hand on her sister's arm. "It's okay." "No, it's not." Emma cried, brushing Lily's hand away. "None of this is okay." I pulled Emma into a hug, holding her as she sobbed into my chest. "I know," I whispered. "I know it's not okay. But we're going to get through this. I promise." That night, after the girls had gone to bed, May and I had one last conversation. "I'll stay at Carla's for now," she said. "I think that's best." "Agreed," I said, my tone colder than I intended. She hesitated, looking like she wanted to say something else. "Ethan, I know you hate me right now. And I don't blame you. But I do love them. You have to believe that." I stared at her, feeling a mix of anger and pity. "If you love them, May, prove it. Show up for them. Be better for them." She looked away, nodding faintly. "I'll try." And then she left. The first few days without her were strange. The house was quieter, heavier. I found myself overcompensating, trying to fill every moment with activity. Cooking dinner, helping with homework, watching movies together. One night, I was helping Emma with a science project when Lily came into the kitchen. She hesitated in the doorway, watching us for a moment before speaking. "Hey, Dad," she said, her voice cautious. "Can I talk to you?" "Of course," I said, setting the glue gun down. "What's up?" She glanced at Emma, then back at me. "In private." I nodded, following her into the living room. She sat down on the couch, tucking her legs under her. I sat across from her, bracing myself for whatever was coming. "I've been thinking," she began, twisting her hands in her lap. "About what you said. About how things are going to change." "Okay," I said carefully. "What are you thinking?" She hesitated, then said, "I want to see a therapist. For me. And maybe for all of us." Her words took me by surprise, but I recovered quickly. "That's a great idea," I said. "I can find someone for you to talk to. For all of us." She nodded, her eyes still downcast. I think I need help, Dad." I can't keep pretending I'm okay. Hearing her say that was both heartbreaking and hopeful. It felt like she was finally letting me in, finally allowing herself to lean on me. I'll make the calls tomorrow, I said. We'll find someone good. Someone who can help. She looked up at me then, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Thanks, Dad. I reached over and squeezed her hand. We're going to get through this, Lily. All of us. One step at a time. For the first time in what felt like forever, I saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. The next morning, I made good on my promise to Lily. While the girls were at school, I started researching therapists in our area. I found a family counselor who came highly recommended and called to set up a consultation. Just making that appointment felt like progress, like I was finally doing something right after years of missed opportunities. When I picked the girls up from school, I told them about the therapy plan during dinner. Emma was skeptical, crossing her arms and muttering, "What's the point?" Sophie seemed confused but nodded along, asking if the therapist would be nice. Lily, however, gave me a small hesitant smile. That alone made it worth it. Over the next week, things slowly started to settle into a new rhythm. Without May in the house, the tension eased a little. The girls and I had more time together, and I made a conscious effort to be present, not just physically, but emotionally. One evening, I walked into the living room to find Lily helping Sophie with her math homework while Emma worked on a drawing at the coffee table. It was such a simple scene, but it made my chest tighten. For so long, I'd missed these moments, thinking my long hours at work were for their benefit. Now I realized the best thing I could give them was my time. "Everything okay?" I asked, leaning against the doorway. "Yeah," Lily said without looking up. She was focused on Sophie, gently explaining how to divide fractions. Sophie glanced at me, grinning. "Lily's really good at this, Dad. She doesn't even need the calculator." I chuckled, stepping into the room. "Well, she's always been the smart one." Lily finally looked up, her cheeks flushing slightly. "I'm just good at explaining stuff. That's all." "No, you're amazing," I said, sitting down next to Sophie. "You've been amazing for a long time, Lily. And I'm sorry it took me so long to see it." She didn't respond right away, but the way her lips twitched, like she was trying not to smile, told me I'd said something right. The first therapy session was the following week. I could tell the girls were nervous as we sat in the waiting room. Sophie clung to my arm, Emma stared at the floor, and Lily sat with her hands tightly clasped in her lap. The therapist, Dr. Carlson, was warm and approachable, which put me at ease. She spent the first session just getting to know us, asking about our family and how things had been lately. The girls were hesitant at first, but by the end, even Emma had started to open up. When Dr. Carlson asked about our goals for therapy, Lily spoke up. "I just want things to feel normal again," she said quietly. It was such a simple statement, but it hit me hard. She wasn't asking for much, just a chance to feel like a kid again, to let go of the weight she'd been carrying for so long. "We'll get there," I promised, looking at all three of them. "It might take time, but we'll get there." As the days turned into weeks, I started to see small changes. Emma was less angry, Sophie was more cheerful, and Lily, though still guarded, seemed lighter. She started spending more time with her friends after school, and even signed up for an art club she'd been talking about for months. One night, as I was tucking Sophie into bed, she asked me a question that stopped me in my tracks. "Daddy, are we going to be happy again?" I sat on the edge of her bed, brushing her hair back from her face. "We're already on our way, sweetheart," I said. "It's going to take time, but yes, we'll be happy again." She smiled, her little face lighting up. "Good. I like it when you're home more. You're the best at reading bedtime stories." Hearing that filled me with both joy and guilt. I'd missed so many bedtime stories, so many moments like this. But I was here now, and I wasn't going anywhere. Meanwhile, May's absence became more noticeable. The girls didn't ask about her much, and when they did, it was usually Emma making a snide comment. "Guess Mom's too busy with her new boyfriend to care about us," she'd mutter under her breath. I tried to correct her, but the truth was, I didn't know what May was doing. We'd agreed to a shared custody arrangement, but so far, she hadn't taken the initiative to spend much time with the girls. She called occasionally, but it felt forced, like she was checking a box. One Friday evening, she finally came by to pick them up for dinner. Sophie ran to the door, excited to see her, but Emma hung back, her arms crossed, while Lily stayed in the kitchen. "Hey girls," May said brightly, kneeling to hug Sophie. Ready for a fun night? Where are we going? Sophie asked, bouncing on her toes. May hesitated. Well, I thought we could grab dinner and maybe hang out at Carla's for a bit. Emma rolled her eyes. Wow. Sounds like a blast. Emma, I warned, but she just shrugged and walked away. I saw the hurt flash across May's face, but she quickly covered it up. Well, we'll make it fun, she said, forcing a smile. Lily came to the doorway, her expression unreadable. Do I have to go? She asked, her voice flat. May blinked, caught off guard. What? Of course you do. I'm your mom. Lily crossed her arms. Yeah, well, where were you when I needed you? The words hung in the air like a slap. Sophie looked confused, Emma smirked, and May looked like she'd been punched in the gut. Lily, I said softly, stepping toward her. Let's talk about this later. But she wasn't backing down. No, Dad. I don't want to go. I don't want to pretend everything's okay when it's not. May opened her mouth to argue, but I held up a hand. Lily, it's your choice, I said, my voice steady. If you don't want to go, you don't have to. She hesitated, then turned and walked away. May stared after her, her face a mix of anger and sadness. I'm trying, Ethan, she said quietly. Try harder, I replied, my voice cold. May didn't stay long after that. She took Sophie and Emma to dinner, but Lily stayed home with me. I didn't push her to talk about what had happened, and she didn't bring it up. Instead, we spent the evening watching a movie together, eating popcorn in the living room like nothing had happened. Halfway through the movie, Lily finally spoke up. Do you think she actually cares, or is she just pretending? I paused the movie and turned to her. I think your mom loves you in her own way, but she's made a lot of bad choices. And now she's trying to fix things, but it's going to take time. Lily frowned, pulling her knees up to her chest. She doesn't deserve time. She didn't care when we needed her, so why should we care now? I sighed, struggling to find the right words. You don't have to forgive her, Lily. That's your choice. But holding on to all that anger, it's only going to hurt you in the long run. Her eyes filled with tears, and she quickly wiped them away. I'm just so tired of pretending, Dad. Pretending I'm okay, pretending she's okay. I can't do it anymore. You don't have to, I said gently. You can feel whatever you need to feel. And if you don't want to see her, that's okay too. You have every right to set boundaries. She didn't say anything else, but she leaned her head against my shoulder. We sat there in silence for the rest of the movie, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Over the next few weeks, the girls started therapy regularly, and I made it a point to check in with each of them individually. Sophie was the easiest. She was still young enough to bounce back quickly, and she loved having me around more. Emma, on the other hand, was still full of anger, but she was slowly starting to open up, especially after a few sessions with Dr. Carlson. Lily was the hardest. She was trying, I could see that, but her walls were still up. She was polite, even kind, but there was a distance between us that hadn't been there before. One evening, after Sophie had gone to bed and Emma was upstairs, Lily came into the kitchen while I was cleaning up. She hesitated in the doorway, biting her lip. Dad, she said softly. I looked up, setting the dish towel down. What's up, sweetheart? She fidgeted with the hem of her hoodie. Can I ask you something? Of course, I said, leaning against the counter. She hesitated, then said, Do you ever feel like you're not enough? The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? She shrugged, avoiding my gaze. Like, no matter what you do, it's never good enough. For anyone. I walked over and pulled out a chair, motioning for her to sit. Lily, what's going on? Why are you feeling like this? She sat down, her shoulders slumping. I don't know. It's just. Mom never cared about anything I did. It was always, why can't you be more like Emma? Or stop making such a big deal out of everything. And now with all of this. I don't know. I feel like I failed somehow. Lily, I said firmly, sitting across from her. You didn't fail. None of this is your fault. Not the divorce, not what's going on with your mom, none of it. You've been amazing, holding everything together when you shouldn't have had to. If anything, I'm the one who failed you. She looked up at me, her eyes glassy. You didn't fail, Dad. You were working hard for us. I know that. I was working hard, I admitted, but I wasn't here. And I missed so much because of it. That's on me, not you. She wiped her eyes and nodded slowly. Thanks for saying that. I reached across the table and took her hand. You're more than enough, Lily. You always have been. And I promise I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you know that. She squeezed my hand, a small smile breaking through her tears. I love you, Dad. I love you too, kiddo, I said, my throat tight. The next day, May called to ask if she could take the girls for the weekend. I told her I'd leave it up to them, but when I asked, only Sophie wanted to go. Are you sure, Lily? I asked. It might be good to spend some time with her. She shook her head. I'm not ready, Dad. Maybe someday, but not now. I didn't push her. She'd been through enough already. Emma stayed home too, though I suspected it was more out of loyalty to Lily than anything else. We spent the weekend baking cookies, playing board games, and watching movies. It wasn't perfect, but it felt good. Like we were finally starting to find our footing again. Sunday evening, I picked Sophie up from May's sister's house, and something was off. Sophie was on the porch, teary-eyed, clutching her little backpack. Daddy, she cried, running to me. What's wrong? I asked, crouching down. She got upset because I said I wanted to come home early, Sophie sniffled. May came out, arms crossed. She was being fussy all weekend. I told her she needed to appreciate the time we spent. She's 7, May, I said firmly. She doesn't need lectures. She needs love. May scoffed. Of course, I'm the bad guy now. I didn't argue. I just picked Sophie up and walked to the car. That night, I made a decision. After tucking Sophie in, I called my lawyer. I want to revisit the custody arrangement, I said. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment choice. It was a step toward making sure my daughters were protected. The morning after I called the lawyer, I sat down with Lily and Emma. I'm trying to change the custody arrangement, I told them. Lily nodded quietly, but Emma frowned. Do you think Mom will let us stay here more? It's not about her letting you, I said. It's about what's best for you and Sophie. I'll make sure of that. Later that day, May showed up at the house unannounced. You're trying to take my kids away from me, she snapped. I'm trying to do what's best for them, I said calmly. You're turning them against me. No, May, I replied. You're doing that yourself. She stormed out, but I stayed firm. The line had been drawn. After May's outburst, I focused on strengthening my bond with the girls. I kept the routine steady, helping with homework, cooking meals together, and spending one-on-one time with each of them. Lily started opening up more in therapy, and one evening after a session she said, I feel like I can breathe again, Dad. Hearing that felt like a win, but Emma was still holding back. She'd talked to me, but her frustration with May lingered. One night, I found her sketching furiously at the dining table. Hey Em, I said, sitting beside her. What's on your mind? She hesitated, then muttered, I don't know why you even let Mom take Sophie. She always screws things up. I placed a hand on hers. That's why I'm working on it. But I need you to trust me, okay? Her jaw tightened, but she nodded. Okay, Dad. I'll try. Small steps, I reminded myself.